Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Steel Donut. Today we have for you another Steel Donut Glazecast. With me, I have Bob.
Hey!
And Connor.
Hello!
And special guest Sam.
Hello.
Today's topics of interest are the use of... Well, first off, we will start off by discussing the use of violence in stories.
Oh boy.
Followed by the use of sexual content in stories.
Oh yeah. I got my lube ready. Let's do this.
This is gonna be the M-rated edition of The Steel Donut.
Yeah. This one is rated K+.
Oh yeah. Right.
So, who has some opening statements regarding the use of
Well,
violence?
I want to say this. As far as violence goes, because that's our first topic. As far as violence goes, there's really kind of two kinds of violence that we can talk about. We can talk about like violence between characters who are both intending to be violent, like a fight scene, and then violence from one person to a victim, and those two have very different kinds of, like, when people write about them, there are very different sorts of writing styles and things people write about, and there are different lines that can be crossed. When you're writing a fight scene, it's a lot more mutual, and so it's usually not as graphic to see. But when it's just violence from one person or a group of people onto a victim or a group of victims, that's something where you need to be a little bit more careful. So,
because if you try in the second case, and maybe we'd start with the first case as a whole, but if you try in the second case, you're obviously trying to be shocking or such, or more shocking, but at what point do you roll over into having too much, just shooting for it too much and coming off being unnecessary?
I guess one example, like from something you guys actually did, was that horrible fiction, Bathed in Blood.
Oh yeah.
Where the OC with the incredibly dark past has her parents killed, like at the very beginning.
Right.
And then later on she gets harpooned by Metal Sonic's hand for no fucking reason, and then she becomes a vampire. That's beside the point, but it's just the whole scene where she's just being hunted by Metal Sonic and he's just like beating the shit out of her, and then he stabs his hand through her chest. It's just like, that feels so unnecessary, because it's like she's pretty much already dead, right? And you just it's like you have her, but then you just harpoon her, and
they never really explained why Metal Sonic was trying to kill her.
Yeah,
like, it never came like why her specifically? If someone else had run up there, would he have just murdered them too? Was he just looking for a person to kill?
And then later on, or I guess earlier on, since it was at the start of the story, but later in the chronology, the story starts with her dragging someone into like an alleyway and like killing him, I think.
Oh yeah, because he's begging for mercy.
And she says like, "You tried to molest me" or whatever, but
it's never shown. We don't know what evidence there is that he did.
And even if he did, does the punishments, is the punishment fair in terms of, what he did?
Right. I mean, also, it's not like she's unable to interact with the rest of the society. She can take him to the police.
Yeah.
But instead she decides, I'm just gonna, mete out vigilante justice and murder him in the back alley, and I'm supposed to be the hero for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not saying that heroes cannot be violent, but usually heroes don't do violence in excess.
Or for no reason.
Also,
I'm sorry. Ark was a hero and he murdered people indiscriminately.
Was he a hero, though?
Absolutely.
He was a war criminal. Don't even start with that.
But can heroes be war criminals?
Ooh.
It depends on the war crime, I think. In this case, probably not, no.
But I think the main issue with the start of Bathed in Blood, and actually, if I remember, didn't the guy get like dragged from the mall and like dragged city blocks to make this happen? Is like so much punishment on him for, in our case, what we got was one line of dialogue justifying it.
Right.
And even if
one unsupported assertion.
One unsupported
She didn't
assertion.
even say it. She just thought it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, she can't speak anymore.
Well, I mean, I'm sure she's healed.
So he doesn't even really know. I mean, if it was a mistake on her part, she just murdered him over her own misconception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she's the good guy.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you looked at me weird, so I'm gonna kill you.
And I don't want this to sound bad, but I think readers want evidence, like, you know, want to see at least something played out that would justify this.
If your character is going to employ violence to do something, we need to either see that character's reasoning, or the character needs to be like a bad guy. Because if we don't get the reasoning, we're not going to be on board for it.
Even if the reasoning itself, you know, is not good, as long as there is at least some sort of reasoning, it could be part of the character, you know, them doing it in because of bad reasoning, but there should still be reasoning, good or not.
What about just violence that isn't explained? I mean, like, what was that, Spyro story?
The legend or the beginning.
Right, the legend.
The Darkness Return or Reborn.
Right. That story had there's this, like, a war going on, and slowly but surely it turns into a weird apes versus humans war, but, like, the bad guys seem to be oppressing people, and Spyro just kind of comes to their village and is like, hey, let's have a big feast. But, like, the people are being oppressed, and it's never described why or how they're being oppressed. They're just being oppressed. Like,
which, you know, there is a nice case for you to actually use some violence in a story to show how oppression is occurring.
Yeah. Yeah, if you just tell us, that would be a great place for you to insert some violence where, since it's the bad guys on some innocent people, we don't necessarily need to agree with the reasoning there.
Yeah.
So, it could just be violence, as long as you don't go so overboard that we feel disgusted with the writer rather than with the villains.
In that way...
That's indeed a very important point, is... like, violence in and of itself in a story is not a bad thing. The thing is that you have to either use the violence in such a way that it explains something regarding the plot, or it goes to show that, oh, these people are horrible because they do these violent things for no reason, or for bad reasons, or just because they can, something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same what I'm trying to get at here is the amount of violence is also a very important point, because you can describe, for example, a similar situation, for example, I don't know, some sort of violence where somebody is brutally murdered or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can explain that in you know, the amount of detail that you use. Greatly changes, well, first off, the accessibility of your story, of course, because but like you said, there is the certain line that if you cross it, instead of being disgusted with the bad guys, you're going to be disgusted with the writer, because it's like, how do you even put this on paper?
It's there's a point where it's because the writer might not have like a strong character. Usually when you're putting like an incredibly violent scene in it, it has like an emphasis, like you said, either on the plot, or it's doing something to characterize a character you're trying to get across as possibly a bad guy, or this violence explains something about him.
And you're saying that they'll do that instead of characterizing them in other ways, and because of that, we end up feeling
it's because
you need
your character to have like an actual personality before you have these events. You can't use these events to characterize. It's just because, like, you can just have like an opening, like a torture scene. You could just open with it, if you really wanted to.
Right.
But at that point, we're like, all right, so this guy's evil. Yeah. But then if you keep going on with that, then it's just going to become stale and boring. And then at that point, we're just bored with the writing, and then we get mad at the writer.
You know, actually, that kind of reminds me, in Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, in the, I think, opening mission, there's a scene where Sam Fisher is sneaking in through someplace. I barely remember this. All I remember is the scene is you sneak into like a warehouse or something, and you see someone who ratted on like a drug dealer being tortured, and you can stop it, but your mission doesn't hinge on that at all. And the point of that is you hear Sam say something to the effect of, like, that's pretty bad shit over there. And his boss says, you gotta keep moving. We've got all these other objectives. And the point is, they're trying to demonstrate that Sam is concerned with people, and so is his boss, but they have a mission that trumps the concerns of, you know, these kinds of things. And in that case, it's not like the main bad guy is torturing someone. These guys don't show up for the rest of the game. They're not even relevant. The point is that there are bad people, there are bad things in the world, and Sam has a job to do. And that's what they're trying to get across. And they're using violence as like a side point rather than the main conflict, which I think worked. It got across that character if you weren't already familiar with that sort of attitude with Sam. Yeah. You know, it got that across, and then you move on. You go finish your mission. And I mean, you can pull out your gun and kill the dude doing the torture, or you can put him to sleep or whatever with a tranquilizer if you want to.
You can save the victim in
You can save the victim, but you don't have to, and there's no reward or benefit or anything other than knowing that you saved the guy in game.
Yeah.
And
so if you were to put that into like the perspective of a story, you could have a similar thing, like written out as a scene, but with the main character probably moving on because there is this important mission,
but
which could then be used to, like you said, which is another way of using violence as characterization, but not by having the
character participate in the violence.
Exactly. You use violence, like indirectly use the violence to. Well, you indirectly use violence instead of having your character perform violence in some way in order to characterize.
Yeah, it was just used as a side detail. It's not like a cutscene moved over to show the guy getting his fingernails pulled out or whatever.
Right. It's part of the gameplay.
Yeah. Contrast it versus, I don't know, like a torture scene where there's actually details or whatever. All I can think of is like Metal Gear Solid 3. You know, Snake gets captured and whatever, and there's more detail there because it's happening to the main guy, and, you know, it's supposed to show more about the scene around him rather than just be a side detail.
What about GTA 5? GTA 5, Trevor has that torture scene.
Yeah, and it's basically just there to kind of offend you because Trevor's character is supposed to be bombastic
and offensive. And at that point, it's like it's already been established that Trevor's clearly fucking insane. So it's
right, if it opened with Trevor torturing someone,
yeah, exactly. It's like that's well within the wheelhouse of what we expect from Trevor at that point.
Yeah, right. If they built up to that instead of just starting with it and going, "Aren't you shocked? Like, look at how shocking Trevor is." You know.
What about here's another issue we've talked about when people intentionally are too gruesome in their violence, but what about when they accidentally have kind of, you know, gruesome details to it? Like the story might be going back to tone. The story might be, you know, having one sort of tone when it comes to its action or whatever, and then
out of nowhere
it seems to switch, and you don't feel like the author or the scriptwriter or whatever knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Like, I have an example, and this is actually... I read Bob some of this yesterday, but you two don't know what this is yet. This is a story I found on Fiction Press called Improvise. And, like, the details at the start feel like, you know, just, not really that much detail. Like, I'm running from the cops. I gotta get away. I'm hiding out in a warehouse. Oh, man, they send the search dogs in. And first, the guy, like, sneaks out and does some stupid stuff. He steals some airbags and handcuffs from a police car.
Don't ask how he stole airbags.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
But he gets back in, and the dogs are going after him. So he first handcuffs a dog to a shelf,
which is insane.
Which is also insane. But then he lays.
How do you even do that?
But he lays an airbag mine, which one of the dogs runs over and gets tossed away. And so you're thinking, okay, it's kind of maybe cartoony, a little like...
I mean, like, if a dog stood on an airbag and it exploded, like, this is absurd already. And it goes flying. His phrase is, they run over it and they go flying. Like, that's pretty cartoony.
Yeah. But then next, as the dogs keep going after him, he smacks a piece of wood into the next dog's face. He pushes a shelf over onto another one and hears a loud crunch. And then he breaks the last dog's neck before getting shot by the police and starts bleeding out. And I'm like, what? I didn't feel like it was intentional.
The violence just wasn't on scale. He didn't keep one consistent scale for how hard the violence was. If it was like...
It started off as PG and suddenly got to R.
Like, he's running from the cops because all I did was accidentally run into their officer. Now they're chasing me around New York. Like...
I get...
It's like there's a sense of escalation that just doesn't work there.
Right. It's not like...
In some situations it does work. I'm thinking of the movie Burn After Reading, if any of you have seen that.
I've seen it, but it's been a while.
There's spoilers if you guys care about like a 5-year-old movie. Probably like 10, I don't know.
Go watch the movie. It's a good movie.
But yeah, there's a scene where George Clooney opens his closet and finds Brad Pitt in there, and he's some stranger to George Clooney at the point. And before Brad Pitt even has a chance to explain what's going on, Clooney just shoots him in the face. And it's like the first incredibly violent moment in the movie, and it's completely out of nowhere. But you're like, holy shit. And it's like a very shocking turning point in the movie, because it's just established that all these characters are jumpy, and the ones that got shot were clueless. And it works in the situation because it's people getting involved with things they don't understand. Right. And it results in unexpected violence. Mm. Where in this story, it's a guy willingly running away from the cops and like committing criminal acts all throughout the story and like getting the dogs off his back, and then the author kind of loses track of how to get or where he's going in the story and just jumps ship and goes incredibly violent out of nowhere.
And I think part of what makes it so like shockingly violent after that is
the go flying.
The go flying. If the dogs were startled.
I'm sending a link. I'm sorry, you have no idea what we're talking about. But
if they just went flying and then the next dogs he just dodged, or I don't know. Well, I mean, he was able to leave the warehouse and get the handcuffs and the airbag.
All the plot issues are secondary.
No, but the plot issues add to how silly it is. Yeah. He was able to break out and then break back in without the dogs noticing him. So it already sets kind of a, this isn't gonna be super violent. This isn't gonna be super.
Yeah, it's like he sort of sets the initial bar for how much violence there is.
Pretty low.
Yeah. Pretty low, exact. And then he just suddenly jumps up like a couple meters into the air, like.
Let's just start actually killing these dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, what made one dog worth breaking the neck and the other one worth handcuffing to a shelf?
Yeah. It's like,
however that works.
It's like if over the course of one episode, the Power Rangers go from punching people out to like, you see them actually beheading a dude on camera or whatever.
The Red Ranger becomes a jihadist. And just like, I don't know.
How the Red Ranger becomes more red.
He saws the head off a guppy.
Red Ranger joins ISIS.
Before we talked, we've currently been talking a lot about violence being done from one person to another.
A victim.
Sort of, there is an aggressor and there is a victim.
Right.
But we haven't talked much about fight scenes so far.
Yeah.
Two people both intending to harm each other.
Yeah.
What kind of lines are there to draw, or?
Well, part of the line that I'd say exists for fight scenes is the same sort of thing that you see in the guy killing the dog. Like if the fight so far hasn't really been too like it has set a certain violence level, you know. Raising that level.
Like the difference between, I don't know, two people just trying to knock each other out or two people actually trying to kill each other.
Well, even so, it's also the method of killing each other. I mean, in Dragon Ball Z, everybody's got, like, energy blasts and stuff. But if one of them pulled out a gun and blew someone's brains out, like if Cell pulled out a gun and killed an innocent civilian by, like, shooting them in the head, that's a completely different sort of thing than obliterating someone with an energy blast.
Or if Goku just, like, rips Frieza's head off.
Right, like, that'd be insane. It would be completely different than anything we've ever seen before. In the fight or in the series.
Yeah. So you have to establish kind of the level of violence
that you're gonna go for
early on. I mean, we're fine when we play, like, I don't know, Warhammer Space Marine or whatever.
Right.
I was watching you play that, like,
it's a very gory game.
From the beginning, you know, you're shooting bullets and you're using chainsaws on your guns and whatever.
Right, you're stomping people's heads.
And so you understand what to expect.
Right, and the game's not gonna shock you with having some kind of even more violent thing, because they know how to set a consistent tone, and it doesn't hurt that the fact that they have limited budget for animations and stuff like that, and they set a tone and then they reuse animations, but the level of violence stays consistent from the beginning to the end.
I'd say a good example of that, too, would be the God of War series.
Yeah.
Where it's, from the get-go, you're told it's going to, or you're shown that it's going to be this incredibly violent game.
Right.
With a very self-centered person.
Right.
Like, he does both, or the fights happen both ways. Like, he'll attack people that don't defend themselves. Like, he kills innocent civilians because he's an asshole. But he also kills monsters and shit that fight back, and it's just, the escalation is already at basically the peak throughout the game, so there's
no growth there.
Yeah, and it's not really over the top. I mean, in the third game he does rip someone's head off, but that's still not that over the top for the series.
And the thing is, every time you see something that's different, that makes your eyebrows raise and you go, holy shit, it's always things where the violence level hasn't changed, but it's the creativity of the kill that makes you raise your eyebrows. You're saying, holy shit, to the creators of the game or the animators or whatever for making it look like X, Y, or Z, you know, rather than
it's not so much, oh my god, where did this violence come from? It's like, oh my god, I would have never thought they would be, you know, clever enough
to come up with
something like this.
That's a really cool idea. It looked really actiony or something like that.
Like there is a difference there between, like you said, make your eyebrows raising instead of being like, oh my god, where did this violence come from?
Yeah. Instead of jumping up violence levels.
How did this happy-go-lucky thing suddenly turn into, I don't know, World War II?
You know. Now that I think about it, what about like Happy Tree Friends? Happy Tree Friends. I never thought it was funny. Like, that was just me. Other people might, but I just never thought it was particularly funny. But the whole point of that series is that it's a bunch of childish-looking, cartoony characters who are being put in situations or enacting really violent things, and that's supposed to shock you. It's the humor. It's shock humor based around those contrasting elements.
Yeah, that's like what were the cat and mice from The Simpsons? Was it Itchy and Scratchy?
Yeah, Itchy and Scratchy.
Yeah, Itchy and Scratchy.
Yeah.
A similar thing. A similar thing going on there, where it's basically Tom and Jerry, but with violence amped up to 11.
Right.
Yeah.
And that only works because of the contrast between. I mean, if Tom and Jerry didn't exist at all, and we had never seen cat and mouse going after each other with, traps and things like that in cartoons, Itchy and Scratchy wouldn't work. It would just look really out of place,
Exactly.
But because we were already familiar with Tom and Jerry, which is not that high level of violence, so it's okay to ease somebody into, Itchy and Scratchy can step it up and not feel like completely out of nowhere. We're being gradually let in because it's someone else doing it, Mm-hmm. If the guys who made Tom and Jerry decided to make Itchy and Scratchy, that would be weird.
That'd be funny.
But because The Simpsons doing it, it's a different audience, it's a different creator.
Yeah, exactly. Like, of course, already, because it's already The Simpsons, you already expect a certain level of absurdness.
Yeah.
Absurdity to occur, in which case Itchy and Scratchy works because it takes something that we know and makes it absurd by adding in a lot of violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also what we talked about escalation earlier, but that was kind of in the frame of that being a bad thing, like coming out of nowhere, like on accident. So what about escalation when it's done right? When you start with one thing and you naturally move to another thing, and the violence.
Well, then in that case, it sort of depends on the contents of the story. For example, if you write a story that takes place during a war and it starts off with just the mission briefing and the people being dropped and where they have to complete their mission and such. Then there is, of course, you already expect a certain amount of violence, like people getting shot or whatever, because it takes place, on the battlefield of a war. But
I think
in that case there is a certain amount of not so much escalation.
I think what Connor was getting at. I think what Connor was getting at was, and correct me if I'm wrong, the idea that, there might be a fight between two people, and this fight starts off at a certain level, but little by little, throughout the story, or throughout the fight, it continues to get more and more violent, and they're reacting to each other and building.
And I had an example, like, for the war thing, you're still kind of expecting that going in, because it's a war story, but as a good example of what I was talking about, I'd talk about the Harry Potter series. It starts out, more cartoonish, I'd say, or like, beasts.
More childish.
More child-friendly, I'd say.
Beasts, versus humans,
but they're not killing each other.
Yeah, they get knocked out. But as a war develops and in the later books, it becomes more human on human, more trying to injure or kill with the spells they're firing. You still don't get a huge amount of graphic violence, but you get more,
more tension. And by the end of the last book, you're talking about a bunch of characters that we knew from the previous books who are dead. Like, I think Fred was the Weasley twin who dies in the last book. And,
so what should you do, or what do you do to have escalation done right? What do you want to have?
Escalation like that. Oh, I'm sorry. You can
go. At first, I do think that it should be gradual. Like, you need to sort of slowly build it up. Like, if we go back to the example of Harry Potter, it's not the difference between book 1 and book 2 where all of a sudden, there's this giant war out of nowhere going on. During the book series and the movie series, you see this building up. You see how the political structure changes, rumors start to happen. People, you sort of feel
the whole world is moving in that direction.
Exactly. You feel it. You can see it coming.
Yeah.
And that's escalation done right. You can anticipate that something violent is going to happen.
Yeah.
Escalation done right.
Versus just all of a sudden somebody gets shot in the face out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with that. Escalation done right is a long and gradual thing. Especially, like, the more extreme it is, the longer it'll take. Just like, how many books are the Harry Potter? 7 books.
Can you do good enough escalation in one story or one movie, or should do you have to do it over the full thing, and each part should have its own level?
You could do it over a shorter thing if you were doing it by.
It has to be a more volatile. It has to be a more volatile setting.
Yeah, that, and it also has to. If you could include time skips.
Too.
Where
Game of Thrones.
The setting is moving forward every once in a while to kind of skip over the continuation of something, making somebody and then building frustration. It starts off on day 1, and then day 300 it skips to, and between those two, it's been more of the same, but it's my frustration with the situation is built up, and now my character is doing something more violent, more drastic.
The Gunslinger would be a good example for that. Have you guys read The Gunslinger at all?
Mm-mm.
It's a Stephen King book series. I've only read the first 2, but the first book, you get the mission of a guy named Roland, and he's just chasing this dark It's just called The Dark Man or something like that. It's been a while.
DMX.
Yeah, DMX.
Dark Man X.
He's chasing down Obama, and it's like this barren wasteland, and there's no one around. He's just following his tracks in this wasteland, and he gets to a village full of friendly people, and he meets this kind of messed up looking bar or waitress, and he bangs her just right there because she's nice to him, and she's like, "Hey," I don't really have the money to pay for this, and then they get together, and it's like kind of his way of paying for it, and it's done in a way that's. I mean, it's a little kind of awkwardly casual, but it's Stephen King. That's how he does it.
Right.
Yeah.
But then afterwards, he wakes up, and this dark man has possessed the entire village.
Oh.
Or he's possessed the speaker of the village, who has convinced all of them that he is a bad man.
Oh, shit.
So then Rowan is forced to kill the entire village.
Oh, shit.
And it's like a really serious moment where he's like screaming and just super sad, but he doesn't really show it. Because he's been through so much, and you don't know it at this point in the book because there's a lot of flashbacks in the book. But he kills the entire village and just keeps walking on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but then I assume that there is already a sort of creeping sense of dread.
Yes, there are like undead people in the village who are just like showing something is clearly wrong. The seer clearly doesn't like him from the beginning, and she has the power over the entire village basically. So it's like, it's foreshadowed from the very beginning that something bad is going to happen in the village.
And then all of a sudden something bad happens, but because you could see it coming and it like we said before, it doesn't appear out of nowhere.
Yeah. That's how
you can do it right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving on from violence.
Speaking of banging an awkward...
Exactly, nice segue.
Awkward
Thanks,
casual.
An awkward casual meetup. Let's talk about sex.
Let's talk about the use of sexual content in stories.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start off by saying, fan fiction was created because somebody wanted to see a character in a story fuck someone else. Like,
yeah,
that is
maybe.
That is why I think fan fiction was created.
That was the genesis of fan fiction.
I think somebody read like, fuck, what's the book?
Nanoha. Oh my god. And then they thought, you know what would be great? If Millie Ashford from Code Geass fucked my random character.
Or it's like they read Harry Potter and they're like, Ron should fuck Harry.
Yeah. Well,
I mean that's like
should.
way more modern.
And Draco and Harry.
Yeah.
And then Harry and Ron and Malfoy all.
It's just like, and that's why this channel exists to an extent, because it's like people make such ridiculous fan fictions because they go into it with the idea of, I want these two characters to get together, and then they write the story.
Even if it's not just for sex, like they want these two characters to get together as a friendship or whatever.
And they write the story without knowing anything about the characters, and these characters are completely out of character.
Yeah.
And then it's just like two really awkward people just boning.
Yeah. Well,
so it's like, if you want to do that right, you need to know the character you're putting into this situation. Like, if you're writing about Harry, you need to have read all the books and you need to know his character.
But most of them have read all the books. And most of them just don't know the character.
Yeah.
They still haven't learned what the character is
It's like you need to stay true to how the character... It's like, I know it's a fan
Labeling
fiction,
it AU doesn't count. Alternate universe does not count as your good enough excuse for why Harry Potter's boning Ron Weasley's dog.
Just because it's an alternate universe doesn't mean he can be, like, an emotionally retarded man.
Yeah.
You need to understand how, like, human interactions work, and you need to understand how that character would handle those interactions. You can't just be like, hey, babe, you want some fuck? Like, Harry and Ron are friends. And it's like, they would have interactions that...
Now, there are two things that I want to say about that. One, a lot of people get what they think are normal lead-ups to sex from things like porn and anime, and neither of them are good examples of how real-world relationships work.
Yeah.
No.
If you try that shit in real life, you'll get arrested, or you won't get laid. At
the very least, yeah.
Right.
At the very least.
You will walk away wondering why it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is because those things aren't realistic. Especially porn.
That's what... Yeah, exactly. And that's what... That's, I think, is... Like you said, a very big problem is not only that, but is that a lot of people also take what happens during sex itself from porn, which again does not relate much to to reality.
Right. I mean, if for every person who thinks sex is real life sex, like between people who aren't being paid, it tries to think that's what porn is like, or and porn is like that. Like they're not. They're not even similar. Every ridiculous position you've thought, I couldn't do that during sex. That's right. You couldn't, because most people couldn't. Because most people don't. Ostrich style is not a normal thing to do during sex.
What?
And ostrich style is where you bend forward and then you stick your head in the ground while the other person's fucking you.
Yeah. You had a second point.
My second point was basically that. That sex, when people are having sex, for one, nobody's thinking about anatomy. I don't know, I haven't even heard of a person in real life thinking about the anatomy of a situation while having sex. So when you start talking about anatomical parts...
You're hitting my womb.
Right. Yeah. Nobody has ever said or thought that. Two, you need to understand where the parts are before you write the scene, because if you don't, then you're gonna have problems when describing how things work. For instance, and this is also a grammar issue, in All for Love, and I'm getting away from the womb thing because I think that's obvious to anyone who's ever seen a vagina.
Yeah.
In All for Love, at one point, the girl is sucking his dick while he's fucking her. How?
What?
How?
What?
Excuse me? Maybe you haven't noticed, but the mouth is a little further away from the vagina than the tongue.
Does yoga.
Yeah. She does. Yeah, incredible. And apparently so does he.
Yeah.
Only he just does penis yoga that lets his dick go in and then out of the vagina, maybe?
Did you not know it's like connected? It went up and out the mouth. And that's how she reached it.
Right, she's sucking on it like a hard candy.
Yeah.
Just in the corner of her mouth. That's how she's sucking his dick while he's fucking her.
Oh God!
But if you don't know, if you can't clearly piece together how anatomy works, I mean, at the very least, you should be able to draw on your own sexual experience. And if you don't have any sexual experience, then you're kind of at a loss before you go into it. But I mean,
even then. Like, even if you have no experience yourself, you should be able to imagine how a body can bend.
Yeah.
So you should be able to know when something is just physically impossible.
Right, and it's also, you should also know whether your characters are supposed to be able to bend that way, because, I mean, if you're talking about, like, Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, he can probably bend that way, whichever way. But if you're talking about someone else, like the Thing from the Fantastic Four, he's probably not going to be able to bend very much.
So...
And we're going to notice that as the readers. We're going to go, huh? What?
Okay.
What?
So we've been on anatomy for like 10 minutes now, but what questions do we actually want to ask about sexual content in general, its use of across all of fiction or whatever?
You see, I do think, like, you can use sex in such a way that is important to the plot. Like, not all use of sex is, like, purely for, well, pornographic use.
Sure.
But, like, for example, you can write a story about somebody who has intimacy issues. And you put them in, well, of course, you put them and their partner in situations that are decidedly sexual, just not immediately going into the boning, for example, but just explaining,
foreplay or whatever, yeah.
Exactly. In such a way that the character that has, intimacy issues or something like that is capable of slowly easing into it. And maybe you can even have some setbacks in that. I don't know. That's
Hold on, plot. Connor, you need to stop masturbating to his description.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Continue.
Like you like, but that's more of a plot issue maybe. But you can in such a way use content that is decidedly sexual in a way that is different from just using it to arouse your reader or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, it's just smut.
You're right. And,
exactly.
And there might not be anything wrong with writing smut. I mean, obviously, I don't have a problem with people producing or watching porn, so I don't see why, if somebody's, can get off better from reading something than watching porn, that's all, whatever. That's fine by me. I don't care.
Fine and dandy.
Yeah. But if you're trying to not write smut, and you just insert smut, there's a problem. Actually, there was I was looking in the Chicago PD section because somebody asked us to look for a story there. I was looking through there and I saw a story where two people had sex, and I thought the author actually handled it pretty well. And basically, what happens is the two characters throughout the Chicago PD series, these two characters have sort of a tension, a will they won't they kind of thing going on, and then. Right. In the story, they finally just go for it, and you see it's like the lead up to it, and they don't even bother describing the actual act of sex.
Yeah.
They just show them putting their clothes back on, line break, putting their clothes back on and being like, you cannot tell anybody that we did this. And they go back and everybody knows. Everybody just knows by looking at them. And whether or not that's realistic is kind of beside the point. My point was, they weren't trying to write smut, and so they just didn't. They didn't write smut, and instead they led us to the point where we knew something was going to happen, and then they showed us the aftermath of it, because we don't need to see the rest of it, because they're not trying to titillate us. And if they were trying to, that would be okay too, but it might feel out of place in a longer story. If that's the whole story, then whatever. Yeah. But this story was a little bit longer than that, so...
I think sexual content is it's kind of got a fine line. If you start to really have any details of the actual act, then you've kind of fallen over the line, and either it's unnecessary or your story was, supposed to be smut, and then all the other stuff is just going to be padding. Then, I feel like you kind of do need to go all or nothing, sort of. Only have a little bit.
Even then. There is still you can still sort of dance on the line, I think. Like the example that I came with someone with intimacy issues is actually a story that I read once. I believe it was in the Special Victims Unit section.
Thought you were gonna say special ed. Continue.
No, but it was in the Special Victims Unit section where somebody after a traumatic experience that is very hardly described, that is very clinically described because it is described in police reports. Mm-hmm. And then this person, of course, after that traumatic experience, has issues.
With intimacy.
With intimacy. And then the scenes, like I said, the scenes where they try with their partner to be intimate again, there are descriptions there that do mention, of course, a certain amount of detail. Not too much, just enough that you know what they are trying to do, and whether or not they succeed, or if she maybe has a flashback or something along those lines.
I think you can use graphic description to a certain extent if your plan is to contrast that sort of feeling, that direction that somebody else might take it with where you are actually taking it. So if something interrupted the sex scene, be it like somebody having a traumatic experience that is now flaring up and they're now having PTSD or whatever, from this moment, those things can interrupt a graphic sex scene, and that contrast between, this is where the smut author would have gone, and this is where I'm going with it, that can really help build a good message or tone or whatever you're trying to build by doing that. That can be used effectively.
Yeah,
it's almost misdirection at that point, but. The people who are trying to write serious stories and they don't know how to write a sex scene without making it smut, That's where it feels really out of place.
Yeah, like, Yella, if I can ask, was this story just like a one-chapter thing? Or
No, this was actually a longer story, I believe, up to something like 37 chapters or so, because, like, it never really got to, at least for as far as I read it, it never really got to the point where, all issues were gone, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And that's more realistic.
That was like the entire main plot with a bunch of subplots also in there, was that this person trying to be able to be intimate again with somebody.
And that makes sense for the section you're talking about.
Yeah, and
if that was happening in like the Spider-Man section, I'd have a problem with that. Because the story might be well written, but why did it have to be in Spider-Man for this extremely sexual tone? But Special Victims Unit is the Law and Order spinoff about sexual crimes, right? So
yes.
And again, if you have smutty stories in the Law and Order Special Victims Unit, you need to stop. Just stop. Get that shit out of there. That is not the right tone for that section.
Yeah.
But it's really there's. I think part of the fine line between writing smut and writing a sex scene that makes sense, besides the characters making sense being in that situation, besides the casual nature of it, like how easily did we get led into this? Besides both of those things, it's also very, very much a word choice thing.
Exactly.
Some words and some words for the genitals can sound very strange to one person and not very strange to another person. In my case, I don't think there's ever a sex scene where you need to use the word cunt. That's just not gonna sound sexy to me. If you're trying to get your readers to feel titillated, you need to have an eye on what your readers are going to think is sexy and what they're not going to think is sexy. And if they all think that the word cunt is a great way to describe a vagina and still sound sexy, then I guess go for it. But
what about hole?
Hole?
Yeah.
Wet hole?
Her gaping hole.
Yeah.
His throbbing dick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Member.
Throbbing member.
You have to make sure that you, again, don't just turn it into, you don't want to take your word choice from porn.
His revolting cock.
No, that's just it. If you're trying to do smut, I'm not someone who writes or reads smut. That's just not me. I'm much more for video porn. That's more my thing. But if you're writing smut, you can take some of your word choice from porn. Actually, now that I think about it, there is a story we've done that the problem with the story was everything but the word choice.
Okay.
Well, actually, that's not entirely true, but for the most part, it was okay.
Was Yoi Mune?
No, not Yoi Mune. Yoi Mune had the language issue, for sure.
Yeah.
What a girl does to get an A. Everything in that story was really shitty.
Yeah.
But the sex itself wasn't described like using the wrong words.
Yeah.
It was just the word choice, like the word order was wrong.
And the situation in which the sex was happening.
Right, the situation was wrong, and the dialogue was completely corny, but the word choices themselves weren't the problem. They didn't pick and choose really strange words like, I want to see your vulva. That'd be weird to say during sex. Let me see your shaft. Like, huh?
Yeah.
But I still feel like there's sort of a line there, like for your Law and Order story, like it understands it's dealing with really mature themes, really complex things, and I assume the story's M-rated.
I should hope so.
It is.
All for Love was K+.
The author knows how the website works.
Sorry, I assume it's K+ rated. But then I think that's more acceptable than like we've been bringing it up, but let's finally bring it in really for real to discuss the one big thing about it. Yoimune, it's an action story through and through until a graphic sex scene in the final chapter.
Didn't work.
Spoiler alert! I didn't know that was coming.
Didn't work at all.
What do you mean? I thought it worked really
well. On one
well.
hand, it's the perfect bow to put on top.
I know, but the way
Did you say the perfect bone to put on
bow
top?
to put on top.
The way he put it in was so fucking asinine.
Like,
wow, guys. You guys keep using innuendo. He's talking about the bone on top. You're saying put it in?
The whole story, there's been no sexual content at all,
like,
except stuff haphazardly
the
thrown
only
in.
thing was...
If anything, Ark is actually like the most...
asexual
awkward around exactly.
He's
decidedly asexual.
He's either completely awkward around women, or it's strictly about the mission, and he's not thinking of sex stuff at all. The only thing I could think of is again issues when the bad guys are first introduced that Yoimune just throws in to make them look like more like bad people.
Like the one thing,
which maybe we could talk about sexual content in that case, but then
throughout
through and through, Ark saves the day, and I guess gets rewarded with a graphic sex scene.
The thing when I read it, I noticed there was like Beartix was
Beartix, yeah.
She was kind of hinting at that she was like flirting with Ark.
Yeah.
She was flirting with him.
She
heavy flirting.
Yeah.
Actually, she like sucks on his fucking finger halfway.
Yeah,
in a restaurant.
in the canteen.
And then there's like
in the canteen. That's even worse.
Wasn't there like some innuendo between him and Nanoha? But then
no,
it's just like
no, not him and Nanoha. It was him and what's her face.
What?
Like not?
Hayate.
Yeah.
When she fixes his bandages
it was
or whatever,
completely random.
and like
she's
doing a
when
nice
she makes
thing.
dinner for him.
Yeah, it was random. But
when she cooks him dinner
between the two goddess.
No.
Still
that's
remember
right.
that
The
fucking
reason
thing.
that
Maybe there was more of it than I
mean, the reason that sex scene didn't work, other than the fucking horrible English, was just how uncharacteristic it was of. I mean, if you could get anything from Beatrix, so it's just like
that's true.
It's like
she had like no personality besides she's flirting with Ark.
How uncharacteristic it was of the story.
Yeah, and
it could have been
like,
rated K+ up to
like,
that point.
It was at that point. It's
well,
just
it was.
like
actual
after
K+.
that.
Okay,
it's like at that point you can tell Yoimune is just getting this she's saying exactly from some fucking like hentai he watched or something, because she's like, "I love you so much. I've masturbated to you every night,"
right?
And it's like, oh my god,
you're hitting my womb.
Yeah.
I do also want to notice that he's banging her doggy style, and she turns around to kiss him.
Right,
that's
another one of those. Maybe some porn actresses can do that, but unless you're in the circus because you can fit into a box,
you cannot bend the
right, and most people can't. So when you have when you have Yellow Ranger banging Red Ranger in your Power Ranger story, chances are Yellow Ranger can't bend like that.
I don't know. They do some pretty cool poses.
I guess so.
Yeah. But again, like it doesn't work with the rest of the story.
It's an entirely action-based story. So whenever you get like the fucking beach scenes or the random romance scenes, it's just like they feel so. I guess the beach scenes work for like anime in general.
The beach scenes in Yoimune still kind of work because there's no thought put into them.
That's true. If he had tried to make them sexy, that's what usually beach scenes are for anime. For anime, usually it's fan service.
Yeah, usually you just throw in some random fan service in the middle because why the hell not?
Right, and that you can argue doesn't work, but he doesn't even use it for that. He uses it to advance his plot, which is weird.
Ark had like one stray thought of him being the only guy there around,
and then he just goes back
of a large group of women, and then he just.
And then he immediately poisons his friends.
He shrugs and he's like, okay, whatever.
Wasn't he introduced to Beatrix at one of the beach scenes?
Yeah.
She like stops fucking time or something.
That's what I mean. That's literally, he uses a beach scene to advance his plot instead of using it for sex. And that makes us not expect it even more when it comes in at the very end.
Like, if you were going off the rest of Yoimune, you would think the ending would be like, Ark says all this stuff about always putting the mission ahead of others or whatever, and then they just, I don't know, get married, and that's the details. And then there's the scene where he kills people because he's Ghost One or whatever.
Yeah, now he's Ghost
I must gonna marry you.
Yeah, and all that, but just... Yeah, the disconnect there was really the issue.
basically there is a similar issue there as we talked about earlier with violence, is escalation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like no escalation. It's all one-sided.
There's nothing that points in the direction that a sex scene or whatever is coming. It just suddenly out of nowhere happens.
Actually, you're exactly right. The violence and the sex in Yoimune are both one-sided from the beginning. The violence is one-sided. Arc is one-sidedly destroying everyone, and Beatrix is one-sidedly coming onto Arc, and then at the very end, for whatever reason,
the one-sided violence,
it becomes sex between the two of them.
The one-sided violence is something I like to call Dragon Ball Z syndrome, where it's just like it's where one character is like, he's going to win always, and it's just a matter of him getting strong enough to beat him.
I guess that's true.
And then, like, throughout the entirety fucking Super Saiyan got Super Saiyan.
Yeah.
Have you seen that shit?
Yeah.
It's like that is the perfect example of where it's like, they're gonna win, they just need to reach the power level to get there. And it's just escalation. It's constant escalation, because once it plateaus, people aren't interested anymore. But it gets to such a ridiculous fucking point that you're just losing interest.
Yeah.
And it's like, with Arc, you could tell he was like meant to be that kind of character where he just keeps getting stronger. And then apparently he was
stronger at sex too. He was powering up. He was just saving his energy, his sex energy, for the entire story until the very end, where he could let it out in one big spirit bomb. Oh!
I think as another example of the sex scenes not working with the rest of the story is one of the ultimate bad movies, The Room. Getting stuck on. I don't know if you've seen it, but just getting stuck on a sex scene for like 10 minutes. And then that has nothing. I mean,
it goes nowhere. It has nothing to do with the rest of the movie.
Yeah,
especially since I don't know, man.
He moves in from the fucking side.
Yeah,
he hang glides over to her.
Boss.
You know what TV show had really good sexual tension and violence put together?
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Venture Bros.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It did.
No, like Brock and that one. What's her name? The Russian
Molotov cocktease.
Yeah. I forgot that was her name. But the two of them are like literally trying to kill each other and having sex in the same scene at the same time. And it's done for partly comedic effect.
I can't wait for the new season.
Me neither. And also done for the sake of to show just how aggressive their relationship is. And it works there because you can see how tense Brock is through the whole show. And this is just one of the many ways his tension shows. And you see her trying to kill him and trying to have sex with him at the same time. It's like, it's in her name. It's consistent throughout. Instead of, the two of them are fighting, the two of them are fighting, the two of them are fighting, suddenly they're fucking. And you go, oh, I guess that's happening.
Yeah, I was hoping that would happen between Kennard and Arc.
Yeah, before it was revealed that they were the same person.
Before it was revealed that Yoemune was an incredibly homophobic piece of shit.
I'm telling you guys, I stand by my theory that Kennard was the real Ichimaru Kai, and Arc was the clone, and they swapped places like a fucking baby swap thing, swapped at birth bullshit.
Oh, dumb.
Yeah, when there were 10 clones being made of Kai or whatever, right. 2 of them accidentally got swapped.
Yeah. Hilarious antics ensue.
Yeah.
I don't know why there was. Whatever. That's your issues, not this issue.
So for the third straight podcast, the ultimate answer is consistency.
And for the third straight podcast, the ultimate answer is don't do as Yoimune does.
I think that's just the message of Steel Donut in general.
Just change Glazecast name to the Yoimune Fuck Ups podcast.
No,
well, I mean, he's the longest series you guys had, and there are so many prime examples of what not to do.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's just like, at the base level, at least you need to know.
The golden age of fanfic.
Okay, the base level to do both of these things, to write violence and sex, you need to know how to logically write down sentences. Doesn't matter what language you speak, you need to know how to write
whatever language you're writing in, you need to be able to write competently.
Otherwise, people aren't going to take you seriously.
True.
And you need to know the characters that you're getting involved in it.
Yeah, either the violence or the sex.
Exactly.
They need to make sense going into that.
Yeah.
And there's still some other issues, but the long and short of it is,
that's just the very, very basic.
Bare bones for us to give you maybe a pass.
Also, of course, is again the consistency has to be there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. There has to be a consistency in maybe the tone of the story, or something to show in which direction the story is going, so it's not out of nowhere in your face. What the fuck is this?
Right. It's smut or violence are not things to just insert because you can. They should be things that you planned for from the beginning.
I'm looking at you. Bullies get bullied.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that would have been a great example. Like, 3 chapters in a row are sex scenes, and then they go back to kiss.
A picture, it'll last longer.
And then they go back to beating the shit out of a bunch of high schoolers.
He kicks a dude's leg in.
Yeah, Terence the Jackhammer Wilson. God, we should start using that.
Or Terence the Terrence Williams.
Damn it, it's too late, but we missed a great opportunities to have that throughout, because, these chipmunks are, like, grievously wounding these high school kids, and not only does the gym teacher let them do it, but he, like, walks away, and
then the security guard helps.
Yeah, the security guard.
That's another anatomy situation, too.
At least, somebody in the comment section to one of those videos is like, can't wait for Terence's sex scene. Which would have been amazing.
I don't know.
I don't remember who that was, but
I guess that's a pretty good note to end it on. If you haven't seen The Bullies Get Bullied, please
go watch them. If you want to know how not to do sex or violence.
Yes, exactly. That's your perfect example for how not.
Either watch that or Yoimune. Yoimune is a bit longer. Bullies Get Bullied is more condensed and has those two as its main problems.
And has Rocket Hot Wheels.
Well, but...
Did we mention that it's foot-tall chipmunks beating up these high
schoolers? Yeah, that's what I was saying. Anatomy issues. Anatomy and just understanding of
we're not even we didn't even talk about their cars or all the things. Bullies Get Bullied has so many great parts to it. So.
And it's got writing issues, too.
Yeah.
A few.
Just a few.
Just a few.